The twin suns of the Ardon Nebula hung low in the sky, painting the dusty plains in deep gold and crimson. The wind carried the sharp scent of burning metal. Out here, on the lonely trade routes between Vulpine colonies, trouble was never far. Kyle walked beside his battered speeder bike, scanning the horizon. His left arm ached from an old injury, and the sand crunched under his boots. He had been on his way to a small human outpost when he heard it. The sound of energy weapons in the distance. Short bursts. Sharp. Desperate. He stopped, listening. That wasn't just a skirmish. It was an ambush. Kale muttered under his breath. Of course it's on my route. He knew better than to get involved in local fights. The Vulpines weren't friendly to humans. Old tensions from border wars still lingered. But the sound of the blaster fire kept echoing in his ears, mixed with faint, panicked screams. Something in him couldn't walk away. He swung a leg over the speeder, revved the engine, and shot toward the noise. The scene came into view fast. A small Vulpine convoy, 3 hover wagons and 2 escort skiffs, was pinned in a narrow canyon. A dozen raiders in scavenged armor darted between rocks, firing into the wagons. Sparks and smoke filled the air. Kale slowed only enough to aim. He drew his pulse rifle, resting it against the bike's handlebars. His first shot hit a raider square in the chest, dropping him instantly. The second and third shots forced 2 more to dive for cover. The raiders turned toward him, surprised by the sudden attack. That was the opening the convoy guards needed. The escorts fired back with renewed energy. Kyle swerved his speeder into the canyon, zigzagging between boulders to throw off enemy aim. The bike's engine whined, echoing off the stone walls. He slid it to a halt behind a rock, hopped off, and advanced on foot. A female voice cried out from one of the wagons. Not a scream of fear, but a command, sharp and urgent. "Protect the young!" Kyle peeked from cover. In the largest wagon, a tall Vulpine woman stood, a blaster in one hand, shielding 3 smaller figures behind her. Her fur was silver-streaked with white, her posture proud despite the chaos. A raider lunged toward her. Kyle didn't think. He stepped out and fired. The raider fell at her feet. She looked up, her golden eyes locking on him for a brief, startled moment. More raiders were pushing in. Kale knew he had to break their momentum. He grabbed a grenade from his belt, lobbed it into a cluster of enemies, and ducked back as the explosion ripped through them. The shockwave shook the canyon walls. The surviving raiders cursed and retreated. Some fired wild shots to cover their escape. In less than a minute, the canyon fell quiet, except for the hiss of cooling metal and the groans of the wounded. Kyle approached the main wagon, keeping his rifle low but ready. The tall Vulpine woman stepped forward to meet him, still breathing. "Hard. You're human," she said in a tone that was more statement than question. "Last I checked," Kyle replied. "You're welcome." Her ears flicked back slightly, a sign of wariness in her kind. But then her eyes softened just a little. "I am Lady Sira of Clan Velra. You have saved me and my daughters." Kale glanced past her. 3 young Vulpine girls peered out from behind the wagon's door. They were dressed in travel cloaks, their fur colors marking them as siblings, but each with distinct features. The eldest had deep russet fur and steady eyes. She was the one who looked ready to step forward and speak, but held back. The middle one had storm gray fur and a scowl, gripping a small training blade tightly. The youngest, with soft cream fur, clung to her mother's cloak, her wide eyes fixed on Kyle in curiosity. "They're safe," Kyle said quietly. "For now," Lady Sira replied, her voice low. "But they will come again. They will not stop until my daughters are dead." Kyle helped the surviving guards tend to the wounded and repair the wagons enough to move. As they worked, he learned more. The raiders weren't just random scavengers. They were part of a war band loyal to a rival clan, one that had sworn vengeance against Lady Sira's bloodline after a political betrayal years ago. Traveling openly was dangerous, but Sira had been trying to reach the safety of the capital before the enemy could organize. Clearly, she hadn't been fast enough. "You should get to the nearest garrison," Kale advised. "They'll have soldiers." "The garrison commander is in the pocket of my enemies," she said bitterly. "If we go there, we die faster." Kale wiped sweat from his brow. He wasn't looking for trouble. He had his own reasons for staying off the radar, but walking away now? That didn't sit right. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "North. To Velra Keep," she said. "It is fortified, but many days away, too far to go alone." Kyle knew that route. It cut through rough, lawless territory. Raiders, mercenaries, even wild beasts roamed there. The odds weren't good for a group with wounded and 3 children. He sighed. "Fine. I'll ride with you until it's safe." Sira studied him for a moment, as if weighing his worth. "My daughters are warriors in training. They will fight if needed." Kale's lips quirked in a faint smile. "Good. Saves me some work." That night, they camped in a sheltered alcove in the canyon wall. A fire burned low, casting flickering light on the faces around it. The eldest daughter, Leora, finally spoke. "Why help us, human? You don't even know us." Kyle was silent for a moment. "Because when I hear someone screaming for help, I can't ignore it. Doesn't matter who it is." The middle one, Vea, narrowed her eyes. "Or maybe you want something from us." Kale met her gaze evenly. "I want to get to my destination in one piece. Helping you just means we're all less likely to be killed on the way." The youngest, Rin, tilted her head. "You're strange," Kyle chuckled. "You're not the first to say that." Lady Sira watched this exchange without interrupting. When the girls settled, she leaned toward Kale. "I will not forget this, human. But you must know, by aiding me, you've made yourself a target." Kale poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks into the night. "Wouldn't be the first time." The night was quiet for a few hours, until Kale's instincts woke him. A faint crunch of gravel outside the camp. He was on his feet instantly. Rifle in hand, figures moved in the dark. Scouts, lightly armed but moving with intent. Kyle didn't hesitate. He raised the rifle and fired the first shot, the muzzle flash lighting the rocks. The camp erupted in shouts. Leora grabbed her bow, Vea darted forward with her blade, and even little Rin scrambled to wake the guards. It was a short fight. The scouts fell quickly, but it was proof that the raiders were still tracking them. When it was over, Kale turned to Lady Sira. "They'll be back. In force." Her expression was grim. "Then we must move faster." Kyle nodded. The journey to Velra Keep had just become a race against time, and he was now part of it. By the time the suns rose, the convoy was moving again. Kyle rode ahead, scanning the path. The wind carried the scent of danger, but also something else. Determination. He didn't know how this journey would end, but one thing was certain. He wasn't just protecting strangers anymore. He was protecting a mother and her 3 warrior daughters. And no raider in the galaxy was going to take them while he still drew breath. The convoy moved at first light. The canyon walls soon gave way to open plains, where golden grass swayed in the wind and the twin suns painted long shadows. Kale rode at the front on his speeder bike, eyes scanning the horizon. Behind him, the 3 hover wagons rumbled along, their repulsors humming softly. Lady Sira sat in the lead wagon, but her daughters often moved between the vehicles, restless and watchful. They weren't like most children Kale had met on his travels. There was no aimless chatter or idle play. Every movement had purpose. They observed everything. By midday, Leora, the eldest, approached Kale as he checked the terrain through his rifle scope. She was tall for her age, her russet fur brushed smooth, her amber eyes sharp. "You've been scanning the horizon every 20 heartbeats," she said. "Do you expect an attack?" Kyle kept his gaze on the distance. Always expect an attack. That way you're never surprised? Leora tilted her head slightly. That is, a human way of thinking? Kyle glanced at her. It's the way I've stayed alive this long. She considered his words before giving a small nod, then walked back to the wagon without another word. The middle daughter, Vea, was different. She had storm-gray fur and a restless energy. She followed Kale more closely, almost challenging him. When they stopped to rest near a rocky outcrop, she approached with a training blade in her hand. "Fight me," she said. Kale arched a brow. "Why?" "To see if humans are as skilled as they claim." Her ears flicked forward in challenge. Kyle set his rifle aside and stood. "All right, but don't cry if I embarrass you." She lunged first, her blade cutting through the air with surprising speed. Kale sidestepped, letting her momentum carry her forward before gently hooking her ankle with his boot. She stumbled but caught herself. "You're quick," Kyle said, "but you lead with your shoulder, makes you predictable." Vea's eyes narrowed, and she attacked again. This time, Kale parried her strike with a small metal rod he'd picked up from the campfire tools. The sound of metal on metal rang out. After several exchanges, Kyle disarmed her with a flick of his wrist. Vea stared at him, breathing hard. "Show me how you did that." Kale smirked. "Maybe later. You'd have to promise not to use it on me in my sleep." Her scowl deepened, but there was a hint of a smile at the edge of her mouth. The youngest, Rin, was another story entirely. She had soft cream fur and wide, curious eyes. She asked questions constantly, about Kale's weapons, his bike, his clothes, even the strange scar on his jaw. "What's this?" she asked one evening, poking the dent in his armor plate. "That," Kale said, "is from a plasma round that almost took my head off." "Did it hurt?" "Not as much as you'd think," Kale replied, hiding a grin. She followed him everywhere, occasionally mimicking his movements when she thought he wasn't looking. If he checked his weapon, she pretended to check hers. If he crouched to examine, tracks, she crouched beside him. By the third day, the girl's suspicion of him had shifted into something else. Not quite trust, but a willingness to learn. That change came sooner than expected, thanks to a surprise encounter. The plains gave way to low hills, and Kale noticed a faint dust trail far behind them. He signaled to Lady Sira, and the convoy stopped. Through his scope, he spotted 3 hoverbikes speeding toward them. "Scouts," Kale muttered. "They'll keep following until they can call in the rest." Lady Sira's jaw tightened. "We cannot outrun them." Kale swung onto his speeder. "I'll handle it." Leora stepped forward. "We can help," Kyle shook his head. "No, stay with the convoy." But Vea was already grabbing her blade, and Rin's ears perked up. "We can ride with you." Kyle gave them a long look, then sighed. "Fine, but you follow my lead exactly. If you don't, I'll tie you to the wagon myself." They rode, out together, Kale in front, the 3 girls following on smaller scout bikes from the convoy. When the enemy scouts saw them approaching, they slowed, unsure if this was a trick. Kale didn't give them time to think. He accelerated, weaving side to side to throw off their aim. At 30 meters, he fired his rifle, hitting the lead bike's engine. It exploded in a burst of sparks, sending its rider tumbling. Vea darted left, cutting off another scout's path and forcing him toward Leora, who fired her bow with deadly precision. The arrow, tipped with a small explosive, detonated on the bike's front panel, disabling it instantly. The 3rd scout turned to flee, but Rin, who Kyle had expected to hang back, sped up and cut across his path, forcing him to swerve, straight toward Kale. One clean shot later, the last bike was down. When they returned to the convoy, Lady Sira stood waiting. She looked at her daughters, dust-covered, panting but unhurt. Then at Kale. "They are growing faster under your watch than I expected," she said quietly. Kale shrugged. They already had the skills. I'm just helping them use them. Smarter. That night, the camp was quieter. The girls sat together near the fire, whispering about the fight. Kale cleaned his rifle in silence until Leora spoke up. "You could have fought alone," she said, "but you let us come. Why?" Kale looked at them. "Because if I'm gone tomorrow, you need to know how to survive without me. Out here? No. One gives you time to train in safety." Vea crossed her arms. "You speak like someone who's lost many people." Kale's gaze flickered to the fire. "I have." The girls didn't press further, sensing the weight in his tone. The next day brought new challenges. The terrain grew harsher, jagged rocks, sudden drops, and narrow passes. Kyle taught the girls how to spot ambush points, how to read signs of recent travel in the dust, and how to use the land itself as a weapon. In one narrow gorge, Kale had them practice setting a tripline trap with scavenged wire. "Doesn't matter how big the enemy is," he said, "if they never see the ground coming up to meet them." Rin laughed, but Leora's expression was serious. "This could win battles, or end them before they start," Kale replied, on. The evening of the 5th day, they spotted smoke ahead. Kyle signaled for caution and crept forward with Leora to scout. In a shallow valley, they saw the remains of a caravan, Vulpine traders, slaughtered and stripped of goods. The raiders had left only hours ago. Kale's jaw tightened. "This is what's waiting for us if we get careless." Leora's eyes hardened. "Then we won't be careless." When they returned to the convoy, Kale noticed the girls moving differently. More alert, more aware. They weren't just passengers anymore. As night fell, Kale stood watch while the others slept. Lady Sira joined him, her cloak wrapped tightly around her. "They are beginning to follow your ways," she said. "It is unexpected. Humans are not known for discipline in our records." Kale smirked faintly. "Maybe you've been reading the wrong records." Sira's gaze lingered on him. "You fight like someone who carries a heavy burden. Why stay with us when it would be safer to go your own way?" Kyle didn't answer right away. He looked toward the sleeping forms of the 3 daughters. "Because if I don't, I know exactly what will happen to them. And I'm tired of seeing that happen to people who don't deserve it." Sira said nothing, but her expression softened. Seas. Stars above were bright, the wind cold. Somewhere far in the darkness, Kale knew the raiders were gathering again. But now, as he looked at the 3 young warriors in training, he also knew something else. If they came, the raiders wouldn't just be facing him. They'd be facing the daughters of Clan Velra, and they were learning fast. The morning began cold and gray. The suns had not yet climbed over the hills, and a thin mist curled along the ground. Kyle stood beside his speeder, checking the rifle's sights while the convoy prepared to move. Lady Sira's daughters were unusually quiet. Even Vea, who often pestered Kale with questions or challenges, sat on a wagon step with her blade across her knees, eyes distant. It wasn't the weather making them tense. It was the news Kale had brought back from his early scouting run. Tracks. Fresh ones. Too many for a hunting party, Kyle had told Sira. Light walkers, small hovercraft. They're following us. Sira had nodded grimly. The war band knows where we are. They set off quickly, winding through low hills covered with sparse, wind-bent trees. The girls took positions on the wagon's flanks, eyes scanning the ridges. Kale rode ahead, but the constant feeling of eyes on him was impossible to shake. Around midday, they came upon a small trading post, just a cluster of prefab shelters and a fuel pump, half buried in dust. Kale motioned for the convoy to stop. "Better to refuel here than run dry in the canyons," he said. The place seemed quiet, almost too quiet. A thin-boned Vulpine merchant stepped out from the largest shelter, his fur pale and patchy, eyes flicking nervously from Kale to the wagons. Long way from the main road, the merchant said. Long way from trouble too, I hope, Kale replied. The merchant forced a smile and began filling the wagon's tanks. But Kyle noticed his hands trembling and his gaze kept darting to a corner of the yard. A stack of crates that wasn't quite stacked evenly. Kyle walked over and kicked one. The top crate shifted just enough to reveal the muzzle of a rifle. He spun, grabbing the merchant by the collar. "Who's coming?" the merchant stammered. "They made me signal them. They said they'd burn the post if I didn't." Kale shoved him aside. "Mount up," he shouted to the convoy. "We're leaving now." They were halfway to the next ridge when the first hoverbikes appeared on the horizon, riding hard to cut them off. Kale gunned his speeder forward, dropping behind a boulder to return fire. The daughters moved quickly, Leora sniping from a wagon roof, Vea racing alongside Kale to harass the flanking riders, and Rin tossing small stun grenades that Kale had given her 2 days earlier. They fought hard, but it was only a delaying action. The warband wasn't committing all its forces yet. They were testing the convoy's defenses. When the last bike broke away, Kale rode back, his jaw tight. "They know exactly who they're chasing. This isn't random." Sierra's eyes narrowed. "You mean they know about my daughters?" Kale looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head. "They know about me." That night they camped in a rocky hollow. The girls were still tense from the fight. Kyle sat apart, cleaning his rifle in the firelight. Leora finally approached. "You said they're after you. Why?" Kyle didn't look up. "Because I'm not just some wanderer. I used to be a soldier," Vea joined them, frowning. "Lots of humans are soldiers. That's not special." Kyle gave a humorless smile. "I wasn't just a soldier. I was part of the Rim Guard, the kind they send to fight battles no one wants to admit happened." He set the rifle aside and stared into the fire. "We were stationed on a moon colony during a border dispute. Orders came to clear the settlement, because it was considered a strategic risk. But the settlement was full of civilians, not just humans, but dozens of species. Rin had crept closer now, listening intently. "What did you do?" "I refused the order," Kale said simply. "The others, they followed it. By the time I got back from warning as many people as I could, the colony was ash. The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. They called me a traitor to my command. I called it walking away from murder." The girls were silent for a long time. Finally, Leora spoke. "So these raiders, they were mercenaries hired during that war," Kale said. "Some of them lost pay, lost ships, because of what I did. Others just think hunting me is good sport. Either way, they've been after me for years." Vea's ears twitched. "And now they're after us, too." Kale's gaze was steady. "That's why I didn't want you riding into battle with me. My enemies don't care who they hurt to get to me." Sierra, who had been listening from the shadows, stepped forward. "You saved us without knowing we were already targets. Now our paths are joined." Kyle met her eyes. "And your daughters will suffer for it if we're not careful. The next." 2 days were tense. The convoy moved faster, avoiding open ground where possible. Kale drilled the girls in tighter combat formations, forcing them to adapt quickly. In the evenings, he told them about human combat tactics, deception, misdirection, using terrain to force an enemy into disadvantage. Leora absorbed every word. Vea tested each trick against him, refusing to rest until she found a counter. Rin asked questions so simple they sometimes made Kale pause and rethink his own methods. Despite the danger, Kale could see them becoming sharper, stronger. But he also knew time was running out. That time ran out at the end of the week. The convoy had just crossed into a narrow mountain pass when a voice boomed from a loudspeaker ahead. "Kyle Ren, this road is closed. Hand over the Vulpine heirs, and we might let you live." A figure stepped out onto a ledge above, a massive Vargan hybrid in blackened armor, carrying a heavy cannon. Kale recognized him instantly. "Krath," he muttered. The warlord smiled down at him. "Thought you could hide behind wagons and fur, Kyle? You've been a thorn in my side for too long." Kale kept his rifle lowered, but his stance shifted. "You still owe me for that ship I wrecked on Varnus." Krath's grin widened. "Oh, I'll pay you back, slowly." The daughters had taken positions without being told. Leora's bow was already drawn, Vea's blade ready, and Rin crouched by the wagon with a stun grenade in hand. Krath's gaze moved over them, and he chuckled. "These are the little warriors you're protecting? Cute. I'll make sure they watch you die before." The sound of Kale's rifle cut him off. The shot didn't hit. It wasn't meant to. It slammed into the ledge just in front of Krath, sending a spray of stone shards into his face. The warlord roared, ducking back. That was the signal. Blaster fire erupted from both sides of the pass. Raiders poured from hidden tunnels in the rock. The convoy guards returned fire, but they were outnumbered 2-1. Kale moved like a shadow, firing, reloading, shifting position before the enemy could pin him. Vea fought at his side, cutting down raiders who tried to close in. Leora picked off gunners from high ground, while Rin darted between wagons, tossing explosives to block advancing groups. The fight was fierce, but Krath wasn't pressing for total destruction. He was testing Kyle again, and making sure they knew he could reach them anywhere. When the last of the raiders pulled back, the pass was littered with scorch marks and the smell of burned metal. As the sun set, Kyle stood at the edge of the camp, staring into the dark. The girls approached him together. Leora spoke first. "You can't send us back, Kyle. If Krath wants you, he'll chase you no matter where you go. And if he wants us too, then we should fight together." Vea crossed her arms. "We're not hiding in a fortress while you take the risk alone. Even—" Rin nodded firmly. "You said you teach us, so we survive. Then teach us everything." Kyle looked at them. Really looked. In their eyes, he didn't see fear anymore. He saw determination. He exhaled slowly. "All right. But understand, if you fight with me, there's no going back to the way things were. This will make you enemies for life." Leora met his gaze. "We already have enemies for life. You just gave us a better way to face them." Lady Sira stepped forward, her voice calm but strong. "Then it is decided. You are not just a guard, Kale. You are champion to Clan Velra now." The word champion hung in the cold air like a vow. Kale didn't correct her, because somewhere deep down he knew that was exactly what he had become. The sun dipped low over the jagged mountains as Kane stood on the ridge, staring at the distant valley. Smoke curled upward in black streams. The enemy had been there, burning villages, leaving nothing but ashes. His jaw tightened. He knew this was only the beginning. Behind him, the 3 Vulpine daughters approached, silent as the wind. Each carried their weapons, Lyra with her twin daggers, Sari with her curved blade, and Nea with her longbow. Their mother, Avara, moved slower, still recovering from the wounds she had suffered months ago. "Another village?" Lyra's voice was tight. She hated seeing innocent people suffer. Kane nodded. "They're getting bolder. This close to the mountains means they're testing us." Nea adjusted her bowstring. "Or they know exactly where we are." The group exchanged uneasy glances. If the enemy had tracked them here, it meant someone had given away their location, or the enemy's scouts were simply too good. Preparing for the fight, they made camp in a shallow cave high in the cliffs. Kane didn't like stopping, but the darkness would hide them from patrols. He kept watch while the others ate. His thoughts were heavy. He remembered the day he had saved Avara, dragging her from the enemy's camp, her body covered in wounds, her breaths shallow. Back then, he had no idea she had daughters, or that they would become his closest allies. Now, they were more than allies. They were family. "Kane?" Avara's voice broke his thoughts. She had come to stand beside him. You're restless. Because we're too close to something we can't see, he replied. And every time we move forward, I feel the enemy waiting ahead of us. She looked at him for a long moment, her golden eyes calm yet fierce. Then we face them when they come. Together. The first sign of the trap morning came cold and silent. No birds sang, no wind moved through the trees. As they descended toward the valley, Sari stopped suddenly. Tracks, she whispered. Cain crouched beside her. The prints were large, too large for a normal soldier's boots. Heavy armor, maybe even mechanized suits, and there were many of them. The trail led exactly where they were going. This is too perfect, Cain muttered. They want us to follow. Then we don't, Nea said quickly, but Cain shook his head. We go, because if we don't, they'll just keep burning villages. They're trying to pull us into the open, but we'll turn their trap into ours. Ambush in the mist. The trail took them into a narrow gorge. Mist hung thick in the air, curling around the rocks like pale ghosts. The silence was oppressive. Then, movement. Figures emerged from the mist, armored soldiers with red insignias across their chests. The enemy. They moved fast, spreading out to block the path. Down! Cain shouted. Arrows hissed past them as Nea loosed her own in rapid succession. Lyra and Sari charged forward, blades flashing. The clash of steel rang through the gorge. Cain fought like a storm. His sword moved in wide arcs, cutting down the first two soldiers who came at him. But for every one that fell, two more appeared. They're surrounding us, Lyra called, her voice strained. I know. Cain blocked a spear thrust and countered with a brutal kick, sending the soldier tumbling over the edge of the gorge. The unseen enemy commander. The enemy formation shifted. The soldiers pulled back suddenly, creating a gap in their lines. From the mist stepped a towering figure in black armor. His helmet was shaped like a wolf's head, eyes glowing crimson. Cain's grip tightened on his sword. He had heard of this one. The warlord of the Crimson Host. The man responsible for the destruction of dozens of villages. You've been hard to find, human. The warlord's voice was deep and cold. But now, I have you. Come take. Me? Cain said flatly. The warlord laughed, a harsh metallic sound. Not yet. I want you to see what happens to those you protect. At his signal, more soldiers dragged prisoners into the open, villagers bound and gagged, Avara's breath caught. No! Cain's gamble, Cain's mind raced. They couldn't fight the entire force and save the prisoners at the same time unless they created chaos. Nea, he said quickly, find a high point. Rain arrows down when I give the signal. Lyra, Sari, get ready to break the line. And you? Lyra asked. I'm going for him. Cain's eyes locked on the warlord. Before they could stop him, Cain charged. The warlord's blade came, up to meet his, and the two clashed with a force that shook the ground. Sparks flew, steel rang, and the mist swirled violently around them. Behind him, Nea's arrows struck true, dropping soldiers one after another. Lyra and Sari carved a path toward the prisoners, their movements a blur of speed and precision. Avara joined the fight despite her injuries, taking down a soldier who tried to flank Cain, turning the trap around. The warlord was strong, too strong, for Cain to overpower directly. But Cain wasn't trying to win by strength. He was buying time. When Nea's final arrow hit the rope binding the prisoners, they scattered into the mist. Panic spread through the enemy ranks. Now! Cain shouted. The daughters regrouped around their mother, fighting their way back toward Cain. With the villagers freed and confusion breaking the enemy lines, the group pushed upward along the gorge wall. By the time the warlord realized they were escaping, they were already climbing to higher ground. The warlord's promise, from the cliff edge, Cain turned back. The warlord stood in the gorge below, his red eyes glowing through the mist. "This isn't over, human!" the warlord roared. "I will find you, and when I do, your death will be slow." Cain didn't reply. He simply turned and followed the others into the mountains. But inside, he knew the fight had only just begun. A new resolve that night. As they rested in a hidden cave, the daughters sat close to their mother. Cain stood watch again, scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. Avara came to stand beside him. "He will follow us." "I know," Cain said quietly. She looked at him. "Then we stop running." Cain's eyes narrowed. "You're suggesting we hunt him?" Her gaze didn't waver. "Yes, before he burns everything we care about." For a long moment, Cain said nothing. Then slowly he nodded. "Then we hunt him." The dawn came cold and silent over the jagged cliffs. Mist curled along the valleys like pale ghosts, hiding the ground below. Cain rode at the front of the convoy, his eyes scanning every ridge, every shadow. The warlord's forces had been tracking them for weeks, and now the final confrontation was unavoidable. Behind him, the Vulpine daughters, Lyra, Sari, and Nea, rode their scout bikes. Their mother, Avara, remained with the convoy, directing the guards and making sure the villagers they had rescued were safe. Everyone knew what was coming. Cain glanced at the girls. They had grown stronger, faster, sharper than he had imagined possible. But this battle would test them all, not just skill, but courage. The battlefield. They reached a plateau overlooking the enemy's base, a fortified camp filled with black banners and armored soldiers. Cain took a deep breath. "This is it," he said. "We hit fast, hit hard, and make every second count. We have one chance to break them before reinforcements arrive." Lyra tightened her twin daggers. "Then we make it count." Sari nodded, gripping her curved blade. Nea's hand rested on her bow, eyes fixed on the enemy below. Cain signaled, and the convoy split into 3 groups, one to distract the enemy's front lines, one to flank, and Cain himself leading a direct strike at the heart, the warlord's command tower. The attack begins. The first shot rang out from Nea's bow. Her arrows flew like silver streaks, knocking guards off walls and into confusion. Lyra and Sari darted forward through gaps in the enemy lines, blades flashing as they carved a path. Cain surged ahead, shield and sword ready, moving like a whirlwind. Soldiers fell before him, unable to keep up with his speed and precision. But for every enemy downed, 2 more appeared. The daughters fought alongside him, a perfect storm of Vulpine agility and human tactics. Lyra struck with precision, Sari with power, and Nea's arrows rained terror from above. Together, they were unstoppable. The warlord's counterattack, then a shadow fell across the battlefield. The warlord himself descended from a tower in a black hover platform, his red eyes blazing. "You should have stayed hidden, Cain," he shouted, voice booming over the din of battle. "Now you will see your friends die before you." Cain's jaw tightened. "Not today," he charged, cutting through soldiers as he made his way to the warlord. But this enemy was no ordinary soldier. Each strike Cain delivered was met with equal force. Sparks flew as blade clashed with blade. The daughters fought fiercely beside him, holding back waves of soldiers that threatened to overwhelm him, turning the tide. The enemy had numbers, but Cain had strategy. He led the daughters and guards into choke points between walls and boulders. Traps set during the night, hidden pits, tripwires, and explosive charges tore through the enemy ranks. Lyra used the traps to funnel soldiers into narrow corridors, where Sari's blades struck with lethal precision. Nea fired arrows that disabled the remaining reinforcements. Every move Cain had taught them came together seamlessly. The warlords. Soldiers began to retreat in disorder, but he remained, towering and relentless. Daughter's moment, Cain faltered for a moment under a heavy blow. The warlord's strength was immense, but the daughters saw their chance. "Now!" Lyra shouted. She leaped from a wall, landing on the warlord's platform, daggers aimed for the controls. Sari charged alongside her, slashing at the warlord's armor with her curved blade. Sparks flew as the black metal resisted her strikes. Nea took careful aim with her bow, firing a precise arrow into a weak joint in his armor. The warlord staggered. Cain seized the moment and lunged forward, delivering a powerful strike that finally sent the warlord tumbling from the platform. He hit the ground with a thundering crash, armor cracked, defeated. The aftermath of battle. The battlefield fell silent, except for the distant cries of wounded soldiers. The convoy moved carefully among the ruins, ensuring all villagers were safe. Cain collapsed to one knee, exhausted but alive. The daughters gathered around him, faces flushed with adrenaline. "We did it," Nea whispered. "Together," Cain said, voice low. He looked over at the burning banners and fallen soldiers. "But it's not just about killing the enemy. It's about protecting those who cannot fight for themselves. That's what makes us stronger than them." Avara approached, her eyes proud. "You have done more than save my daughters. You have given them a future, and you have given hope to this land." Cain shook his head. "I didn't do it alone. They fought with me. They are warriors now." Recognition and respect. The Vulpine Council arrived soon after, witnessing the aftermath. Cain and the daughters stood together as the council members spoke. "By your courage and skill," a council elder said, "you have saved not only lives but the honor of Clan Velra. Cain, you are now officially recognized as champion of the clan." Cain's eyes met the daughters. They nodded, understanding that this recognition was as much theirs as his. The council presented medals and ceremonial blades, symbols of their honor and alliance. Cain accepted quietly, knowing the real reward was the survival and growth of the three daughters. A new beginning. Days later, the valley began to recover. Villagers returned, rebuilding homes and farms. Cain watched as the daughters trained younger Vulpine warriors, passing on what they had learned from him. Avara stood beside him. "You could have left at any time," she said. "But you stayed. Why?" Cain smiled faintly. "Because sometimes protecting others becomes part of who you are, and because I knew they were worth fighting for." The daughters ran past, laughing as they sparred with each other. Cain watched, a sense of peace settling over him. The warlord was defeated. The raiders scattered. And for the first time in years, Cain felt that maybe, just maybe, this chaotic universe had a place for him too. The last lesson. That evening, Cain gathered the daughters around a fire. "Remember this," he said, voice firm. "It's not just about fighting, it's about being smart, being careful, and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. You are stronger than the enemies you face because you fight for something bigger than yourselves." Lyra, Sari, and Nea listened intently. They had learned this lesson in Fire and Blood, but now they understood its deeper meaning. "We will remember," Lyra said. "We will honor it," Sari added. Nea smiled. "And we will be ready." Cain nodded. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to relax. They were ready. The clan was ready. Humanity and Vulpine warriors, together, had proven they were a force no one could ignore. Epilogue, a champion's legacy. Weeks later, the valley flourished again. The people rebuilt their homes, crops grew, and trade returned. Cain and the daughters rode patrols together, teaching the younger warriors. The memory of the warlord faded into legend, replaced by stories of Cain, the human champion, and the three daughters who fought beside him. One night, as the sun set, over the valley, Cain stood on a hill, looking at the horizon. Avara came to stand beside him. "The world has seen what humans can do," she said softly. Cain smiled. "Let them remember, and let them never underestimate the power of someone who fights for others." The daughters ran past, their laughter echoing across the hills. Cain watched them, knowing that together they had changed not only their own destiny, but the future of an entire clan.